Well, hello and welcome to the C.M. Kozeman Civil War Extravaganza, where we review the famous or infamous 2024 movie Civil War, starring Kirsten Dunst and a bunch of other people whose names I don't remember. Okay, so I am recording on the 1st of May 2024, and I know I'm late to the Civil War party because, well, life got in the way and lots of stuff. But let's get this party started. If you are new to this channel and if you're just coming here wondering if there could be a US Civil War, or if you're just interested in movies, welcome to my mystical dominion. This is a very eccentric channel where we talk about a lot of interesting stuff. Just honesty and having a good time is the name of the game here. And if you enjoy this proverbial game, please consider supporting me on patreon.com. I am a surreal artist, so if you get to support me there, you will see a lot of fancy paintings and artwork and unseen stuff by yours truly. Also, if you feel like, you just sat down with me and I just basically gave you a good conversation about this movie, imagine maybe you'll feel like we sat down for a coffee or some So maybe you can support me on buymeacoffee.com as well. And also, if you are a diehard Kozeman fan, if you maybe want a CM Kozeman mug to put that coffee or other liquids in, go to the merch store and support me there. I really value every little bit of contribution from you guys, and even $1 a month on Patreon really makes a difference. And plus, you don't leave empty-handed. So that's that. Anyway, Civil War. It's one of those films. It wasn't a great film. It wasn't a bad film. It's just one of those films you kind of want to talk about. You want to get in there, maybe with the directors, and point out all their mistakes. And it's just it's a movie that can open up a lot of conversations, let me say that much. Especially in this day and age, where, especially in the United States, political polarization is at an all-time high. And there are certain ongoing events like the university, Gaza occupations, and just an overall apparent polarization between left and right-wing people, men and women, locals and immigrants, you name it. So there's an overall feeling, by the way, I'll just let it be known in advance, if you believe something like this can happen in the way it happens in this film, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's a very naive and a surface level speculation. I would say even something like the Purge movies are more likely to happen in the way they happen compared to that Civil War movie, which we'll be discussing today. So there will be lots of spoilers, but I don't give a fuck. So let's go beat by beat and dissect this movie like a frog on a lab tray. Okay, so let's get on with the world of the movie. Like, what kind of a civil war is taking place in this film? It's a question that you really end up asking yourself a lot of times when you watch this, because to face it, it's not very clearly addressed in the movie. All we know is that there's been a kind of Donald Trump coded evil president, and he has done many crimes, including having an illegal third term, and he has somehow used aerial bombardment on American citizens. Throughout the movie, there are some lore and hints dropped at what may have happened, and we get to hear hints like something called an Antifa massacre, which suggests that there has been some left-right-wing civil strife, maybe leading up to the war. The president also talks about something called the Florida Alliance, and then there are the opposing forces, which are called, I just love this name. I mean, this is just straight up from the English as a second language hallucination school of writing. Okay, so get this, the main protagonist or the antagonist, whatever your point of view is, facing this evil Trumpoid president is something called Western Forces! Western Forces, motherfucker! I mean, this reminds me of this one time years and years ago when our family took me and my brother to the United States. It was 1998 or 9 or maybe 7, I don't know. But we were staying in New York, okay? And well, we were staying in a hotel in New York City. And my brother, being younger, would fall asleep sooner. So in the next morning, I would tease him, saying that, oh, you were asleep, too bad. I just left the hotel and, went down to this incredible place called Freedom Street. Yes, motherfucking Freedom Street. Of course, I was always making it up. There was no freedoms. And I would embellish this toxic story with like, oh yeah, down Freedom Street, yeah, they had the new PlayStation 2 games up. PlayStation 2 did not exist then, I think. Let me just look that up actually. Yeah, it was released on March 2000. So yeah, I was teasing him about seeing a non-existent PlayStation 2 and like computer games, and oh, there's these amazing game stores, it's just around the corner, man. Freedom Street, motherfucking Freedom Street. So I think the same kind of mindset was used to come up with this name of Western Forces, cause it's basically a, don't ask me how, alliance between Texas and California, who have somehow advanced so far up inland to face the United States Army and various bands of white supremacist coded diehards, okay? They have come up until the gates of Washington, D.C. So it's a bit of a conundrum. Or also in the movie, at one point some people talk about going to a neutral place such as Greenland or Alaska. So it's likely that Alaska also seceded from the Union. We don't know what really went down, but when you go to the Wikipedia page of the Civil War movie, there's actually a map depicting the division of the United States. And so this Florida alliance that's just passed up briefly is actually something very close to the original southern secession. So it's got Florida and basically all the states adjacent to it up until Texas. Then there's something called the New People's Army, which we don't get to see or hear anywhere in the movie unless I missed. But this is constituted by Oregon, Washington, I think, goddamn, I don't know the names of these states, like the northwestern half of the country, okay? So it's a bit weird on that behalf. And the Western forces, it is implied that they have a beef with this fascistic president. I'm not even going to call him Trump coded anymore because it kind of wears off thin after a while. So the Western forces have a beef to pick with this president. So they have this weird flag too. It's just 2 stars, but the original 13 stripes. So that's kind of weird because the 13 stripes, as you all know, represent the original 13 colonies. But none of those are among the Western forces. So I don't know, like I would just have 2 stars, and beats me how the hell this rebellion started. Like how we don't see any more of the so-called Florida Alliance or the New People's Army. How a majority of these loyalist states, most of which are actually Democrat voting, how they did not oppose fascistic president, and we don't even get to know whether this president was from a Democratic or a Republican background or was an independent president. I don't know, maybe you're not meant to know, but all I'm saying is the world building is a bit hazy. When you think a little bit deeper into it, maybe you want to believe, you want to suspend your sense of this. So it could be that maybe California was too left-wing and Texas was too independent and too right-wing. So these opposing forces joined into a new Western Forces Union and kind of marched down on big government. But even in that line of thought, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, who are you to think about it anyways? I mean, suffice it to say that there's this very moot civil war going. And for like 10 minutes, you kind of want to believe this and you kind of go ahead with the flow. The movie starts in New York City, where Kirsten Dunst and a bunch of other gung-ho war journalist types are like, the Wi-Fi is out, the power is out, it's always like that. It's like this kind of Afghanistan or Iraq war journalist hotel kind of vibe, but it's set in New York, despite there being an awful war. And we also get to see resource riots, like before we see this gung-ho war journalist hotel, everybody's drunk and they're kind of like so jaded and like everybody's a character in this film. Oh god. Before we see that though, we do see a big riot in, I think, the Bronx or Brooklyn. People want water, but then someone suicide bombs the scene and it's a big kind of carnage. So we see our lead protagonist, Kirsten Dunst, just like going into this war journalist mode. And yeah, this is like a kind of pathos that I could never understand for the life of me. So Kirsten Dunst gives this like rejected and a dejected 1,000-yard stare and just takes pictures, really dramatic, really dark, dramatic pictures of like dead people, blood on the streets, and like there's this sort of like weird quieting of extra diegetic sound. So it's like really quiet, or you get to hear this kind of ironic soundtrack. This is like from the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, or from the Guardians of the Galaxy school of soundtrack design, where basically there's like some great big carnage going on in the foreground, somehow relevant to the plot too, but in the background the music is just some cool music, you know, it's just life, man, it's just life, you gotta take bitter with the better, man. It's a dark fantasy life, I guess that's the sense they're trying to give. And yeah, Kirsten Dunst does this like weird ass Valium / Ozempic / BPD look while just being kind of disassociated while taking these click 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 ironic photos while people are dying left and right. And this part of the art direction is really cheesy, but I must give credit, the action scenes on their own, they're really like grim and darkly interesting. But unfortunately, after the first two such action scenes, you kind of start wondering, you know, even with the best intentions, you start wondering, why is all this shit happening? If there's a civil war, why are there also riots for resources? Who is the suicide bomber? If there's a lot of strife, why is the power still on? We get this like, we get these really characteristic shots of like big cities like New York City, where there's a civil war going on, but in the background there's always like this like distant explosion. You never get to know why. Is it like the two sides fighting each other, or has law and order broken down so that there's some sort of terrorism, or like is it complete anarchy out there, something like the Purge movies? I don't know. You're not supposed to find out, but there are just these like aesthetic explosions in the background going on. The first one is actually happening when Kirsten Dunst wakes up and she's just watching the news with this dejected look on her face. You know, she's just seen too much, man. She's seen things, and in the out of focus background of the hotel window, you see the soft explosion going off in the background, and it's meant to be like, wow, shit's really going down, man. It's all real, man. This is all real, man. But is it? Also, in a lot of establishing shots, you see the kind of smoke rising in the background from unknown fires or gunfights or explosions or acts of arson. But if there are like two big armies facing each other, does this also mean, because these two scenarios are kind of incompatible, and it kind of grows on you, like this fake ass, this shit is real kind of feeling that they try to beat into the movie so goddamn hard. And if anybody, once again, if anybody really believes that the US is due for a civil war, I don't think that's the case, by the way. We will discuss it later in this big-ass podcast. The US is due for some magnificent and awful civil strife, but it's not going to happen this way. It's not going to happen the way you think. I mean, if there's like the Western forces advancing on the capital, and there's been like air bombings of US citizens and stuff like that, in that kind of war, you also don't get to have like random bombings for water riots, if you know what I mean. Unless there's a foreign force occupying the US, which is not the case here. I mean, so they're trying to basically take up all of these like weird snippets from really dark events that happened in recent history, and in which the US was a major actor, I must add. You know, they try to take it like, oh, what if it was like Iraq, but in the US, like Chirac, you know? Oh, and what if it was like the invasion of Afghanistan. What if the United States was destroyed in the same way we destroyed Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the same way we watched Yugoslavia destroy itself, sitting snidely in the sidelines and dropping bombs? What if this was happening, you know? But it was in the US, you know? What if there's a mall, but it's a downed helicopter? What if there's a highway strip, but it's the Iraqi highway of death, where we bombed a bunch of cars and vehicles escaping the war? These are all happening in the movies. Like, what if there's a sniper duel, but it's in the middle of a winter wonderland party in a kind of like nondescript suburban landscape? What if there's a town, but it's so nice, but there's actually a secret ward and there are snipers on the rooftop? Or what if this is a civil war and there's a sniper on the lighthouse of the Statue of Liberty for no reason other than it's cool? What if there are these gay sniper dudes who are so like wild and cool? And this is actually a scene that happens in the movie. Our characters, don't ask me how, are driving through this suburban landscape, and they arrive in some like golf course or like a farm petting zoo kind of place. But there's a sign that says Winter Wonderland, and there's still a functioning snow machine. But there are also dead soldiers on the ground. If there are dead soldiers on the ground, why was there a snow party? If there was a snow party, and I guess it's hinted that a sniper has attacked this place, why are there no dead civilians in the ground, you know? But no, they only see this shot up Santa Claus statues, this fake ass Winter Wonderland golf course shit, whatever. No dead civilians, but only a few dead soldiers. And they're like, oh my god, it's worrying. What's going on? What's going on, man? What's going on? And of course they get shut up. They take cover. Just happen to land next to a pair of gay sniper spotter soldiers who I can only describe as Tumblr snipers. So they have like painted hair. That was actually a cool trick. Like they have green painted hair. One of the guys has green painted hair as part of his camouflage. The other guy is lying on top of him doing the spotting. But if you know anything about basically how these things work, you really can't shoot well with another guy laying on your back, you know, in a kind of love embrace. So this was one of those scenes in the movie where you kind of get to see it's a case of style obscuring substance. But it's not as bad to be unwatchable, but you just keep on watching and you keep filling up with these questions and these weird angles to look at this thing. It's perverse, but not in a good way, not in a kinky way either. It's perverse in a way that accidentally displays, like, if this is how these people think this thing could go down, they're really wrong. And they really don't know their own country, I'm afraid. Like, Daddy Kozman here, your friendly Turkish eccentric weird guy, has a better handle on United States politics, American people, and if things go down, how it might go down, than these born and bred, dare I say college educated, American directors and filmmakers themselves. Western forces, get the hell out of here. So this is just one of the points, but let's get to a let's get on with our plot point dissection of the film, because we're just getting started. And boy, this film does have a lot of juicy bits for us to dissect. Okay, so we are in that New York hotel, and Kirsten Dunst is joined by a bunch of like full of character journalists, including the Mentat guy from Dune, this lovable, wise old African American journalist who he says he still works for the New York Times. And there's this guy who plays Pablo Escobar in Narcos, and he's meant to be a kind of self-harming, smart but lovable journalist. But he's not a photographer, mind you. Actually, there's one ridiculous scene in which our characters go front line into a firefight. So like they're literally running point with this gang of people opposing government forces. I don't know who's shooting at who. And Kirsten Dunst has her camera and she's going and this guy, I kid you not, has a little freaking notepad and he's just furiously taking notes while they're going room to room, avoiding machine gun fire, like oh god. I mean, I guess he's there because he likes the war and the action and he's a war junkie. But can't this guy do nothing better than like look cool, smoke weed, drink a lot, and also jot down notes in his little notebooks? Because that's where he keeps his ideas. You know, he's a words man. And then the Dune 1 Mentat guy, he's meant to be this lovable father figure who kind of watches out for everybody. It is implied that he was Kirsten Dunst's mentor. And by the way, Kirsten Dunst's character is called Lee. And he's like, Lee, you gotta be careful, you know, you were so young. So this gang of characters is joined in by this young girl. I need to look up at Wikipedia to see her name in the film. Jessie, played by Kaylee Spenny. Okay. And apparently she's going to be in the upcoming Alien film too. I don't know. So she's got this kind of like innocent but adventurous look. And so these misfits assemble what is essentially a kind of make-believe family where Dune Mentat guy is like the old father or grandfather. Narcos guy is the father figure who's kind of dejected. Kirsten Dunst obviously is the mother, and to this gang we have the young girl joining. Their names are so hard to remember. That's the mark of a bad film, I'm afraid. And so their journey begins. It's a road trip. They're driving from New York City to Washington, D.C., but the original highway has been obliterated by air bombardment or something. So they have to do a kind of sideways C-shaped detour going into other states, and basically they're going to do a scissors movement. And right off the bat, they have misfortunes and adventures, and this is the young girl's introduction to a dark and distressing world of violence and war in where's probably upstate New York. They stop to get gas, and there's a bunch of hillbilly coded people there, and they're like, yeah, we don't want a travel partner and stuff. And they won't sell them gas either because it's clear that these guys don't like these journalists. So Kirsten Dunst offers them $300 for a full tank. Well, they don't like that. But she says, 300 Canadian dollars. And then they're like, whoa, Canadian dollars? Okay. Then they let them have their fuel. But in the meantime, the young girl wanders off the back. Basically, this is a gas station in the middle of nowhere, and she wants to like take pictures. And also an interesting thing is that this girl, even though she's young, her father was a photographer, and she takes photos with a traditional film camera. And if you know anything about those things, they're really hard to maintain in the field. Film is really hard and expensive to come by these days, but no, she has to have like these like dramatic snaps, and when she's taking pictures everything is frozen in black and white. So anyways, she's clicking away and like wandering off into this obviously dangerous place where the people, they're all toting guns and they're like this close to shooting them. She goes out wandering at the back, and nearby some car wash stands she sees the hung bodies of looters, and one of them is still alive and like coughing blood. And it's a scene straight out of Apocalypse Now. Now, Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, is an incredible film, and if you watch the Civil War movie, you will see a lot of reference to that one. So she sees these tortured people and it's like, and it freezes up, even though she was in New York photographing the bombing of these water protests with Kirsten Dunst. She's really terrified. It's her baptism with blood in a way. So Kirsten Dunst says, oh, you know, this is how it's always gonna happen. And like she kind of like in a weird motherly way introduces her to the ways of war photography. That night they survive, these rednecks. That night they sleep and there's a big war in the background. And this is similar to the distant conflict in Saving Private Ryan, that very nicely done war movie by Steven Spielberg. They have this one scene where they are marching by the night, and in the background you just see two armies battling each other. It's a really dramatic scene. Now in the Civil War movie, they kind of retire to a mall somewhere and they're sleeping in the trunk, and they're And then the cool guy, I'm just gonna call him Pablo Escobar, he goes to the girl and says, if you don't feel the need to sleep, don't rush it. Like, he kind of like introduces her to the ways of being an adrenaline junkie. And in the background there's this huge war going on, but these two armies for some reason are shooting straight tracers at each other. Are they trying to shoot down drones? I don't know. It's just like a fireworks display. And if you know anything about modern warfare, you only shoot tracers in the sky to shoot down drones or maybe to shoot down light aircraft, especially in this day and age. You can't really shoot conventional jet fighters or fighter bombers with tracers. But yeah, there's that kind of like distant artillery or tracer or whatever duel taking place. So Pablo Escobar is like, yeah, tomorrow we're gonna see this battle, right? We just wanna like... So they take a little detour next day to basically be present in the action. But in the distance we saw these like big conventional armies fighting each other. Close up, they just see some like government soldiers holed up in a public library somewhere. And these gang of like Hassan Abi type, I guess left-wing activists are having a firefight with them. And then this is where that funny episode with the Pablo Escobar jotting down notes in the front line happens. And anyways, they see a lot of violence, and like our lead character, who is actually not Kirsten Dunst, our lead character is the young girl. She gets used to war, and there's this, again, cool, but if you think about it, 5 minutes later, ridiculous scene where Kirsten Dunst is basically giving her a motherly look, and she's like, go up there, man, go up there, girl, show me what you got, girl, take a shot, girl. And like the girl overcomes her fear and like joins the action to take pictures of people being executed and being shot. Mind you, like, these are ridiculous scenes, but technically they're done really well. Okay, when you think about them 5 minutes later, or when you don't watch this movie in an IMAX theater, you kind of like, yeah, it doesn't wash over. But when you're watching them in a theater, or at least when you're watching them in the first 5 minutes, they're really solid scenes. The battle scenes, the war scenes, they're really well done. The art direction is actually really good. The scenes of like landscapes, the background elements, even the angle and the light of the principal photography itself, it's really good. And it's really good without being poke in your eye with a finger kind of good, you know? So that's why you keep watching this film. Like when there's a firefight and people are shooting at each other, the guns are really freaking loud. And if you ever heard gunfire, that's how it is. And it's really jarring and disturbing in a way that's not cool. So credits to this film for that. A comparable film is Michael Mann's really classic film, The Heat, where towards the end there's a shootout. I won't describe that movie for you now, but there's a big shootout, and every shot like really hurts your ears, because that's how guns sound. And that's how guns sound in the Civil War movie. So yeah, they basically go about their business. They encountered a few more violent scenes. They encountered those like gay Tumblr snipers. They go through this town where everything seems normal. But is it? And then they see a lot of weird stuff. They're joined by these Chinese or Hong Kong based journalists who are so crazy, man. They like drive up to our heroes with a fast car and they jump from window to window, and for no reason the young girl is like, I'm gonna try that too, and she jumps from the window to the other car, and then they disappear. Then it turns out these extra Chinese characters who we met conveniently 5 minutes ago, they're like, oh, you crazy motherfucker, where are you? You've been following us. They're like cracking jokes and whatever. They get captured by this gang of genocidal soldiers or militia people. We don't know. But this is the famous scene where this guy says he's basically Genocide baked Alaska. He's really blonde, and his friends are all like very white nationalist coded. I'm saying coded because this movie is so reluctant to take sides too. I mean, look, this is your fictional universe. If you want this to be a universe in which left-wing and right-wing people are fighting each other, just say it. But it's never said, it's always hinted. And this kind of gives it a kind of neither here or there angle, which is really not good. But okay, so Genocide Bake Alaska captures the young girl and one of the Chinese journalists who appeared 5 minutes ago, conventionally, because they're gonna get killed. So he gives his famous like, What kind of American are you? Are you American? What kind of American? And this is meant to be a question that the audience wants to maybe ask themselves in a dark and foreboding way. He's like, what kind of Americans are we? Yeah, but nobody asks that. And believe me, as much as some people, left and right of the spectrum, want to have you believe it, American people are not that polarized. There's a lot of hate being flung over social media. The country is going through a horrible economical crisis. So a lot of poisonous rhetoric. But if you've ever lived among people, if you've ever spoken to people, especially people who did not study college, you get to see that doesn't exist. I'm afraid this whole white or non-white, white versus global south, rednecks versus college educated, left versus right divide. It does not operate in the United States. Now, there are some very dangerous divisions in America. There are some dangerous fault lines. These mostly operate along ethnic lines. But when the push comes to shove, nobody's gonna kill each other. Nobody's gonna have the Western forces assemble. In fact, something like this crazy genocidal baked Alaska guy is the closest this movie gets to reality. As things really go, imagine things go really, really wrong in the upcoming 5 years, 10 years in the States, okay? You can have cases where maybe, I don't know, some people with access to weapons go postal and have this genocidal violent action. Maybe they do something like that really awful New Zealand mosque shooting, that kind of thing is possible, but it's gonna be a local flash and it will be dealt by local security forces in a day or two. I mean, you are having something like this. You have been having something like this for the last 10 years. Every 2 weeks there's a school shooting. I mean, people are killing each other with guns at an unprecedented rate. It's not normal, and everybody's expecting a civil war with, Western forces assemble, Western forces, or it's just something like the Purge. But no, it's when you boil water, you realize the oxygen bubbles start appearing from random pots in the kettle. It's random blips and bubbles like that, with people really losing it because they've been isolated for so long, and now their economic wherewithal is also gone. So they lose it, and they do not turn their weapons at the obvious culprit, which is to say the horrible, unstoppable techno-scientific collusion between government and private enterprise, between those people who treat their hinterland, their own people, left, right, doesn't matter. They treat their own country people the same way an old-time empire may have treated a colony. You look at all these flyover states, everybody's addicted to opioids. There's a suicide epidemic. Heck, one of my very close online friends tried to take her life just a few days before recording this. It's really awful. This is a distributed trauma. It's never gonna take that form you expect or this film's directors expect. It's a kind of a million cuts kind of situation. These are really hard times, but when people lose it, they lose it in such a bad way that they can't even organize, or they can't even organize for a kind of violence like this. They only hurt themselves or their family, or if they're really awful, some local community hotspot with a few conventional scapegoats. That massacre in New Zealand once again. This one maniac in Las Vegas who shot hundreds of people from his hotel room. These school shooters. That's the damning thing about it. The United States can unfortunately absorb this terror because it only blips out locally and randomly, and it hurts the people in a local way. Then it's another tragedy. Then you move on. Business as usual. You struggle for your school payments. If you're lucky, you struggle to keep your job. White collar or blue collar, it's no difference anymore. It's really bleak in that regard. And the people who wield power wield it in the most callous. They're not even evil, they're just stupid. They don't know what to do with this power. And that is why the country is falling into disarray and looks like there will be hell to pay. I'm really keeping a really careful eye on myself, not to mention any political figures by name, but my American friends, you're gonna have an election soon. I'm recording this on the 2nd of May 2024. You're gonna have an election soon. Do you think any of those candidates are real? Do you think they really care about anybody who votes for them? Any party? No, it's really dark. There's no sense of accomplishment in voting anymore. There's no sense of accomplishment in rare cases in even staying alive. Now, I don't want to paint too bleak a picture, but some of the reviews about this film, they're like, this film is like, it comes at a really dangerous time. Oh, politics are more polarized than ever, and we just don't want it giving any ideas to people. The depictions of violence are so spot on. We don't want anyone getting any idea. You really think people operate this way? If you do, you're naive at best, or you're stupid, or you're evil at worst. American people, look, I can tell this from what I know already, from my personal interactions, from basically, okay, I'm a smart guy. From what I see, American people are going through a really rough time. But don't you be scared. Nobody's gonna form the fucking Western forces and shoot up the Capitol. Nobody's gonna have like genocide bake Alaska action. I hope not. But a lot of people are gonna be fed up with life, and they're gonna act accordingly. And in the words of one of my favorite historians, Eric Hobsbawm, the only alternative to a changed world in this day and age is darkness. Mark my words. It's not gonna be a fucking civil war. It's not gonna be white population replacement. It's not gonna be some cabal of conspiring minorities. It's going to be this stupid, remember, sufficiently advanced ignorance is indistinguishable from evil. And it's going to be the stupid lack of initiative, lack of empathy by the actual interests that hold power in the United States. That is to say, the hand-in-pocket collusion between people in the government and the people running the demonically powerful corporations that basically rule the United States. And it's all been like worked in, it's been codified, it's been worked into legislation. It's all part of a system, but it's chafing. And I don't know what's going to replace it, but this system may really get broken in the future. And if that happens, the only thing that's going to save you, it's not going to be guns, it's not going to be ammo, it's not going to be some prepper survival bunker, it's not going to be Mark Zuckerberg's fucking Hawaiian shelter. It's going to be the links you form within your local communities, the links you have with your family. How connected do you see your community as a product and a service? If you do, you're gonna have a bad time. If you relate to your fellow human beings, your fellow Americans as human beings, times are gonna be bleak. America had far worse times. I mean, just look at the Dust Bowl, the Second World War, even some segments of the 1960s and the 70s, they were really dark. I mean, you had people starving and shit. But when times turn dark, listen to Daddy Cosman's words. It's gonna be how you treat your fellow human beings. That's gonna make the difference for you. In the best case, they're gonna share their food. You're gonna pool your resources. Remember, cooperation is a human superpower. Cooperation is a superpower. And for reasons that I cannot understand, well, I do understand, because it's to sell more products and services. The entire aim of the private sector and the government in the United States has been towards isolating, atomizing people, reducing them into individuals who are free to do as they choose, as long as they choose between products and services. Their whole aim for the last, since the Second World War, has been reducing people to money spending units. Every interaction is transactional. Heck, even sex and dating are transactional. And that's why you have the incels and OnlyFans and everything. And you gotta ask yourself, you gotta do what you need to do to stay alive. But why do you need to spend money to stay alive? When enough people start asking this question, maybe we will work towards an answer. I don't know. Well, I do know, but I'm just letting on little hints. So the way you treat your fellow human beings and the way you collaborate with your local community, in the best case, maybe you'll get sick, somebody will share medicine, you'll pool resources, you'll have a neighborly time. In the worst case, your last sight will be a large number of people running toward you at high speed. Mark my word. And the risks are different according to where you are on the social ladder. If you find yourself in a point of luck and privilege, use that privilege to forge connections. Don't be a fake ass connection person, but treat your fellow Americans as human beings. Everybody hurts, okay? I hope I could make sense. Anyways, back to the Civil War movie review. Goddamn, but this channel is always about side views and side tangents. Back to the movie review, okay? Oh man. if you listen to it this far, comment on the comment section. I am ready for the Civil War, Cosm and Daddy. So I know you've been listening and we get some traction against the algorithm. Anyways, then, whatever, they survive a lot of stuff, and okay, they get to the infamous Genocide Bake Alaska scene. The guy with the red glasses asks them, what kind of American are you? Pablo Escobar says, I'm from Florida. Kirsten Dunst says she's from Colorado. Young girl says she's from Mississippi, Missouri, I don't remember. But they're like white-coated Americans. The two Chinese journalists they met conveniently 5 minutes ago, saying, oh, we're from Hong Kong, and like they're executed on sight. Then some shit and action happens. The Dune 1 Mentat guy, apparently he did a quick like eyelid calculation. He went comatose for a millisecond, and he realized that he could ram these racists with his truck. So he comes to the rescue, but not before the young girl falls into a ditch full of hundreds of bodies that these guys killed, okay? And remember, like, this is like faintly the only believable scene in this whole movie. For reasons I just spent half an hour explaining to you, you will not have the Western forces or army action, but you could have, in this stressful environment, you could have a bunch of people going postal and committing a local genocide or what they think is an act of ethnic cleansing. But also remember that physically the act of killing large numbers of people without getting killed yourself, especially in a weapons saturated place such as America, is really hard. But we'll get there. There are like a few more interesting side discussions I have ready for this podcast. Okay, so the girl falls into this ditch and she like wakes up to the true nature of war, genocide, it's awful. And believe me, when a civil war happens, this is what happens. It's not armies marching against each other bravely or like stage set fights and whatever. When a civil war happens, it usually fractures the country along ethnic or religious lines, as you saw in Bosnia and as you tried to force it in Syria, and then people really kill each other in very large numbers, and it's a really dark place nobody wants to go. So anyway, the girl wakes up to the fact that war is death and whatever, and then they move on. Everybody's traumatized, but fortunately they find themselves in the camp of the Western forces, where everybody is kind of like a 2010 US Army advert. It's a multicultural army, and the gear is very clean, and there's a friendly kind of like tense but friendly atmosphere. Oh, also the Dune Mentat gets shot, so he's buried. So everybody's grieving. Pablo Escobar drinks and like screams while tanks run in the background in a dramatic way, or in a way that directors think is dramatic. So anyways, then this is my favorite bit. Kirsten Dunst for some reason goes into like real bitch mode, and from some unknown place she secures like a kind of like, oh, this is for real white shirt, and gets her hair done. The young girl also gets like, she wears this black t-shirt, and they really form this mother and daughter bond now. And this shit is real. It's real because the fucking Western forces are gonna go up Freedom Street, I don't know, and they're going to assault Washington DC to kill the president because he's really bad, and he brought this all onto the world, I guess. I don't know. So that's the final act of the film, and boy, it is a kind of riveting, but also in the first watching it's like, whoa. In the second watching it's like, are you for real? Okay, so the final act of the movie begins, and the Western forces assault Washington DC. By the way, I'll remind you that our gang of journalists were there because they wanted to interview the president, the evil president, and they wanted to ask him why he was such an evil, meanie, bad guy. Ask him why he disbanded the FBI. Was that such a bad act? I don't know. But apparently in movie universe, this guy was a real mean person. He probably circumvented the constitution, ran for 3 terms, and anyways, he was a bad guy. So they want to interview him, but it's a great big combined arms assault war going on there. There are these jet planes, helicopters, tanks taking off, and it's a bit of like a weird montage. And here's something annoying happens, because until this point we've been seeing the conflict through the eyes of our characters. So like when they're pinned down, there's a sniper or something, we don't see the sniper. Now, though, with all this Western forces, planes taking off and like tanks on the roll, artillery and like and stuff like that, you get to see this like panoramic floating camera shots of action and military equipment. And well, it takes a little bit more away from what little suspension of disbelief there was left. So they go to Washington DC, and you know, these scenes, they're well put together for a while. Then you get these like little weird details, like if you know anything about like how military stuff works, there's a narrow street, okay, and just because I guess the producers wanted to show a helicopter there, a helicopter gets inside a narrow street and like shoots at bad guys in a parking lot from something like 100 yards or 30 meters away. And you know, it's a big built up city, someone could shoot you with rockets, you could get tangled up in power lines in the dark, you know, there's no need for that. And also there's like this needless fight in the Lincoln Monument, just because I guess the filmmakers wanted to show some gratuitous building blow-up action going on. I mean, you know, a little skirmish there, it's a little skirmish there, it's like a Battlefront or Battlefield, whatever that game is called. A little bit of Battlefield maps, and like, you know, you fight a little there, fight a little here. This is supposed to be a city under siege, yet every goddamn city light is on. There are almost no barricades. Also, mind you, there are no artifacts of modern warfare around. There's no drone warfare. And we see now from the terrible war in Ukraine that drones actually are a big deal in modern warfare, especially in built-up areas and on flat terrain. You know, everybody's droning each other, and there's none of that. But it would have been cool if in one scene you could suddenly see like a drone drop a bomb out of nowhere, and then there'd be like, oh, run, drones, and then a lot of running action, because they're like these like really dark views of a tiny explosive laden drone chasing a desperate man around until he's like too tired or he falls over and he blows up. There are lots of these like quite disturbing videos of like drones dropping small grenades to like literally blow people up, and it's just dark. But there's nothing like this in this movie. There's also no mines, which is strange given that this president is an evil and cowardly person apparently, and like mines and booby traps would be something I expect. Anyways, then the Western forces surround the White House, and there's this big firefight in the White House too, with tanks and like lots of machine guns and stuff. Once again, the sounds are really great and lifelike. You really feel like you're in a firefight. Of course, Kirsten Dunst and the little girl are also there, together with the narcos guy, you know. And to drive home that this is a really intense firefight, there's this funny sequence where Kirsten Dunst, like in the middle of the fight, she throws herself against the stones and does this sort of like crying for it to end, like, oh, please let it end kind of thing. Like her soul breaks, but then in 1 millisecond later she gets up and gets going. And there's this really, I think this was one of the nicer scenes, where this bizarre scene of the White House staffers trying to break out of the White House with the presidential motorcade, and everybody shoots them up. And the way the Western forces soldiers shoot this motorcade up shows that they really hate this president, you know. So he must have done something really, really bad and awful. We just don't know what, though. I don't know. Like, let us just say the producers did not want to alienate anybody, but they wanted there to be a little war on, you know, just so. So anyways, there's that. But then Kirsten Dunst realizes that this is a ruse, and everybody they kill in the motorcade are either like presidential aides or like Condoleezza Rice types, or, you know, then the actual president is holed up inside. So she goes in with the little girl and the other journalists, and they're joined by this like expert soldiers, very well versed in close quarters combat, and they storm the White House room by room. At one point there's this intense scene where this Mouth of Sauron type of African American lady, she says she's like the president's communications director or something. She comes out requesting to parley, and then there's this no bullshit African American lady soldier on the Western force side, and she just, you know, drops that bitch dead. So They kind of silently worked a bit of like race angle there, and the house versus the field kind of angle there, I guess. Like those little bits were interesting to watch. Actually, this would have been good as a series of short films because it feels so contrived putting it all together and having them all happen to a single cast of characters. But if this was a dispatch of short films from a bigger conflict or whatever, maybe that would have saved the film, but I don't know. But at the end, there's this really intense shootout. They break into the White House. They kill the president. The journalist guy gets to ask the president his question, and he says, any points, and he's just a coward. It turns out he's just a megalomaniac, power-hungry coward. So he just says, "Don't let them shoot me," and he's summarily executed. Whoa, that's like pretty harsh. I mean, if you think about it, not even the Nazis got summary execution. It's very strange and it's very dark, and it's one of those things that some naive viewers think that could give people the wrong ideas. But as we just talked in length, not much about this film is realistic, and so the movie ends. That's that. Bish bash bosh. Once again, just to go over some points, the characters, they act very predictably, but they're likable. At least I could say there are no dislikable characters in the film. I mean, there are no annoying characters. Perhaps Kirsten Dunst's character and her like silly dynamic with the young girl is a bit annoying, but I don't know. The sounds are really nice, the editing, the cinematography, they're all very good, but just doesn't add up. For all those reasons I told you, the US does not look like it's going to have a civil war anytime soon, okay? You prepare for these dark eventualities and it never happens. Instead, you get fucked from something you never saw coming. And as we discussed, the actual threat, there is a latent threat of big waves of violence breaking out in the United States, but that is connected to the really intolerable and unfair imbalances and just lack of hope really in that country. And if something like that happens, it's gonna come from a direction, an angle nobody expected, perhaps not even me. So there was my big review of the US Civil War movie starring Kirsten Dunst and a bunch of other people. I hope you enjoyed it. If you watched it this far, we're not done yet, because I actually seeded some questions to my followers on Twitter and YouTube, and we have some questions about this thing. I basically told them I'm doing a YouTube review for the Civil War movie. Ask your questions about the US Civil War 2.0 right now, and I'll answer them. So we got some questions now. Fallen Funky Monkey says, is there any leftist faction? If so, what's their ideology? Remember, I was talking about this one scene where this like Hasan Abi coded gang of people with AKs. It's basically like people like Hasan Abi and Waush with AKs, and they're wearing Hawaiian shirts, and so I guess they're like kind of left-leaning. They're having a shootout with some soldiers. But to this movie's credit, there are no left or right coded, there are many right-wing coded characters in the movie. There are a few left-wing coded characters, but nobody really says anything. Nobody even the Genocide guy, he does not raise any points about white replacement or something, even though he was clearly like in the business of killing anybody who wasn't a white American, So that's where this movie is a little afraid of treading deep water. So you don't see any left-aligned factions, perhaps except those weird, cool guerrillas. And even they get treated in a way that highlights the way they lose their humanity, because we see them shooting hostages, and it's just the director's way of seeing how war robs people of their humanity. Okay, Kaiser Cut Kingdom asks, not much of a question, but I believe the premise in the film where the president seized power and holds an illegal third term really isn't that out of question, given a major crisis in America. I think some sort of power seizure like that would be framed as saving democracy. Well, maybe. Oh, he continues, and from this, some people will support it as necessary and others will resist and see the danger. So many people caught in the middle just trying to save their lives. I don't think any modern civil war between the states like the 19th century version is likely, but between opposing ideologies within states, And honestly, that's more terrifying because everywhere would be contested. Well, that's true, but remember, when you go down to the level of like normal people who haven't had a managerial college education, ideologies don't really matter. Like, what really matters is putting the bacon on the table, and that's that. And maybe in the worst case, there would be some real diehards trying to, go all postal and political about it. But as we just discussed in my big earlier rant, basically that will be very localized. You clearly, and I think certainly, would not see army divisions or like regiments taking up sides and like shooting at people or each other because of ideological differences. Things like that have happened in the past in the last stages of the Roman Empire, but that was another world and the entire nature of warfare was different, so I don't think this is likely. But when you warn of a third term, also be careful. I think it's much easier to have a president or let's say an authority group exerting illegal extensions to their power by just deploying dynastic actors. First the husband is president for 2 terms, couple of years later maybe his wife or maybe their friend, someone from the same social circles. Would be surprising if something like that actually has been happening for a while. And then the despicable alternatives that crop up and prove to be so hard to beat down, they're just another version of the same thing. Maybe, huh? Just think about it. Anyways, and I got one more question from my YouTube channel from Rusty Shackelford. I'm going to ask a question about the writer's sanity. Yeah, why do they have Texas and California teaming up with each other? I'm Texan and a lot of people here heavily dislike California. Yeah, my point exactly. And to have it called like a Western Force Alliance, I mean, if you really stretch it, maybe one part is too libertarian and the other part is too left-wing to dislike the guy in the Oval Office. But would something like that ever lead to succession? I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to question the writer's sanity or their naivete. And on that occasion, Civil War is a wasted opportunity. Now, imagine if the God of Hollywood came to me, said, C.M. Kozeman. I said, yes, God, I want you to make a U.S. Civil War movie. I would say, it's not likely something like this will happen, God. But okay, I'll give it my best shot. And then I would make a film basically focusing on, it would be a very dark film, but there are much darker films like Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone. That was a masterpiece. And it was like a violent, dark comedy critique of American suburbia, where a couple just goes postal and shoots everybody. And that's that. Now, I would probably make a movie about that sort of genocidal baked Alaska character. The guy who, with his gang, apparently wipes out entire towns, depending on who's American enough or not. I would probably make the movie based on the life of a character like that. I would not really go too deep into the nature of the political conflict, but maybe there would be, I don't know, a natural disaster. Imagine a big superstorm, and then this guy, it's been festering in him for a while, okay? Maybe he's had family problems, maybe he was a psycho to begin with. So he finds himself in a place with his friends, and maybe they've been like radicalized or, I don't know. Also, by the way, let me open another big caveat. Social media is completely absent in this movie. All the journalists are legacy media journalists. Whereas it would be cool if there were some antagonists or protagonists who had made their fame as like some Sam Cedar type of character, or like somebody like Hassan Abi, or more despicable characters like Lawrence Southern, or maybe Baked Alaska himself. If there's a war between the states, you could be certain that social climbers who masquerade as political commenters or political YouTubers, they would be all out of the woodwork like bugs from a burning house. They would all come out. This is why I think these people are dangerous, to be honest. Like, I mean, if you take somebody like Sargon of Akkad or this Carl Benjamin character, what he says, who he is not dangerous per se. Or even people like Destiny. These people are not what they say, or even that cretin Waush. Like, these people what they say, their ideologies may seem correct or not. Maybe they're just a simple guy worried about family values. Actually, if you look through the lines, if you read between the lines, these are YouTubers the same way Hitler was a painter. Now, I'm not saying that these people are going to be genocidal or whatever, but they don't care about their ideology. They care about power. In the current day and age, social media is a form of power. They want that power. It doesn't matter if they're talking about left-wing politics, right-wing politics, the ethics of the genders in Warhammer, the campus protests. No, people like Mila Yiannopoulos, look, you believe these people care about any of these issues? They're grifters. They're grifting for power, and watch them as an antidote. Say what you will about him. He's got many inconsistencies and funny moments. Out of all these people, maybe I'm kind of grifting for a Turkish brother. But out of all these modern political commenters, you could easily see them like if they were dropped into the universe of this film. Sargon, Waush, what the fuck is his name? Destiny, Lauren Southern, Mila Yiannopoulos, I don't know, a fucking bunch of others too. Ethan Ralph. These guys, they would be all over the place. Fucking reprobate vermin that they are. Remember, I don't discriminate between sides. You look at these people, you meet them in daily life, you meet them in business life too. They just want to be out there. They think they're entitled to it. Now I say, Daddy Kozaman says, these people are too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Make of this what you will. And out of this crowd, I will just single out Hasan Abi. For all of his failings, he has his heart in the right place, I think. But anyways, that's just me. Anyways, moving forward with the answer to this thing. What was I even talking about? Who daddy? Yeah, the role of social media is strangely downplayed in this film. Especially given how basically recent events of comparable nature, such as the January 6th riots, were precipitated by social media. So I don't know. Maybe in wartime, internet is cut off altogether, but I don't know, because our characters are uploading stuff left and right. That whole angle could also be explored. So anyways, I was talking about my own Civil War movie. It's about this genocidal baked Alaska character. He and his buddies find themselves in a military or natural emergency. Maybe they kind of, the first half of the movie, we see their earlier lives in the first 1/3 of the film. In the second act, we see the disaster happening, they get deployed. Now in the following parts of the film, they have their first kills, they first take the law into their own hands, they go rogue. And I will tell you something else, knowing from what I know about actual civil conflicts where people basically ethnically cleansed each other's neighbors, killing people even with weapons is an art. Not a good, not in a good way, but it's a skill you need to learn. When you learn it, you can scale it. But not everybody can do it. In fact, I think a minority of people can do such a thing. You take a gun, and no matter how they think their victims are. Imagine you're given a rifle and there's 30 people in a row, and you are told that these are all pedophiles or the worst people ever. You have to shoot them. Not many people can go through them all. Maybe they'll take one shot, they kill 5, then they start vomiting. Because when you're actually engaging in violence, things happen to your mind and body. So I would explore this in depth in my movie, where these bunch of characters, they learn how to basically kill without remorse, and maybe in a darker and more perverted way. They can't use hate for it, They say, oh, these evil miscreants or degenerates, gotta kill them all, but they can't do it. But the character has a breakthrough. Maybe when he thinks about his family or how much he loves, I don't know, a girl he has a crush on or whatever. Maybe he uses that love and perversely inverses it. I'm not doing this for the hate of my enemies, but for the love I have for my community in a dark way. Or perhaps even a rosebud moment. I don't know, he's thinking about a certain lover, and he goes back to her in his mind when he's moving down all these people. And the rest of the movie, there would be really dark scenes of this gang perfecting the act of mass killing. You surround the house first, you watch the back doors, you see people as shapes, whatever comes out of the door, you just drop them. Old people, pets, man, woman, children, just a a 5-hour montage of that. And at the end, these guys in my American Civil War movie, they become so good at this that they start finding, imagine they like cleanse out all the undesirables in one area or whatever. They move on to the next town, but they realize they just enjoy killing now. I mean, maybe they started out with good intentions, but they just enjoyed killing now. Maybe they were just shooting looters at first, but then, they got the kind of mission creep. And then they just start find excuses to like kill large numbers of people. And this will all be like very realistically choreographed. Like I would want people to like actually cry and feel sick and like vomit out of fear, and I would want people to feel depressed for a year after watching this film, because like that's what kind of a thing a Civil War is. So yeah, that would be my take on the American Civil War movie. Maybe even, let's spin the things, maybe even the lead character would be a kind of up and coming YouTube persona. Maybe he tried his grift but he failed, then he joined the National Guard or something, and then all this perverted action takes place. Anyways, that would be my Civil War movie. What do you think about everything I've been talking about for the past hour? I hope you enjoyed this podcast. This movie, the Civil War movie, was bad, but in the terms of the discussions it inspired in me, it was actually good. Once again, I'm reminding you, please contribute to my Patreon, my Buy Me a Coffee, and get my merch, man. It's not like there's a civil war on. And remember, don't worry, the future is bleak, but not bleak in a way this kind of naive and stupid movie makes it out to be. But there are other things you need to watch out of. And if you listen to me this far, please comment and say the following: traitors must die, Dadi Kozaman. Traitors must die, Dadi Kozaman. That's all. Have a nice day, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. Please comment. I love you, and my love and best wishes to the US of A. Goodbye.